at large. Lots of information to go over with you today. But before we get started, just want to remind you that you can comment on our page during the show and put in information that you want us to report on or ask questions. We're happy to do that with you. You also can see us here on Facebook, on Twitter, or on YouTube until such time as, excuse me, I shouldn't have said Twitter, John. It's X now, whatever
X,
that
yeah.
means, or YouTube. Until such time as they kick us off. But anyway, thanks for joining us. I'm Shannon Grady, and this is my co-host.
John Cummings, good morning.
Last night we had our monthly HC GOP meeting, and it was extraordinarily interesting. We had a lot of great information. We had a terrific speaper, Heather, and I cannot remember her last name. It's sort of
Was it
an unusual last name.
Teichman?
Maybe Teichman, yeah. And she came and spoke to our group about the mandates and a lot of different things. Because if you don't know, today they're having a meeting in Columbia to discuss the future mandates and or non future of mandates, if you will. One of the things that I find interesting is, and I think John will agree with me, is that it seems like our governor is suffering from what I call selective memory. He often likes to tout that we did not go through any shutdowns, or certainly not like the other states. But I remember being here, and I was in the real estate business at the time, and we were declared essential personnel. But even we were limited in what we could do, and lots of restaurants closed, and the beaches were closed. And in fact, John, share a little bit of a story that you shared with me last night about the beaches being closed.
Yeah, when I came down, what happened was I was still in New York when all of that hit. And they closed the school I was teaching in, and we taught remotely. So I said, well, I'm not staying in New York, because New York was like a prison. It really was. I mean, it was really locked down. So I came down here, and it was mid-March, third week of March. And I was like, well, I'm going to the beach. It's 80 degrees. I'm going to the beach. So I drive down to the beach, across the Atlantic Avenue, right down to Garden City. And I get to the parking lot. There's cops everywhere. Everywhere. Police lines do not cross. There's like three police cars in each.
Was there a murder?
Oh yeah, I was looking for the tape. So they have police cars in every parking lot, and three different streets. The street parking there. They have the off-street parking, and there's everything's closed. I'm like, what is going on here? So then I keep going down Waccamaw, and I get to you're in Georgetown County really fast. I mean, it might be a half a mile, and guess what? Horry County had closed the beaches, and Georgetown County didn't. So everybody parked on Yucca Avenue and walked onto the beach and walked into Horry County and sat on the beach. Now, right. Now, it's just, first of all, closing the beach is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. First of all, the beach implies social distancing. Nobody's sitting 6 feet from you, and they're not sitting 6 feet from you on the beach. Everybody's 20 yards apart, because it's not the summer crowd anyway. It wasn't a big crowd. And that's one. And two, you're not getting COVID on the beach.
No, the sun kills it.
You're gonna get it in the water, passing fish. What do you got there? So I mean, I just stayed on it. But every day I went to the beach, I had to go to, at least for a few weeks, I had to go to Georgetown, which was no big stretch. But I had to go to Georgetown to the beach, because the Horry beaches couldn't park, but you could walk on the beach. I mean, some of the things that were done, and everywhere, some of the things that were done were just mindless.
Yeah.
Closing small stores and leaving, Home Depot open. I mean, come on.
Right.
I mean, really? We're leaving Walmart open, but you can't go to you can't go to the store.
They put in safety measures. You had those arrows that pointed which direction you could walk.
Yeah, you don't
on
want to pass anybody in the store.
Protect you.
Right. You don't want to pass anybody.
I think somebody said COVID was the smartest virus ever, because it knew that if you were following the arrows, couldn't get you. And as long as you were wearing your mask on your way to the table, couldn't get you. And then when you sat down, it was like you're at home base. I'm on home base. Now I can take the mask off. Can't get me. So couldn't get you there. And it was really interesting.
Roger Slagle made a great point last night, the chairman, that you kind of forget how ridiculous it was. You try to put it out of your head. You want to move forward. And you say, well, thank God that's over.
Terrible memory.
Even though they're going to pull it again. But, when you went to some of the supermarkets, they put up that plexiglass, right? Yeah. And the people in the store behind the register, they had masks on because they were told to have masks on. And then all of the groceries that you touch get put on the conveyor belt. And then that person touches all the groceries to ring them up and puts them in a bag. But there's plexiglass, so we can't breathe on each other. I really?
Yeah.
I mean, just what happened to science? What happened to science? I mean,
Yeah, my theory on the plexiglass is I treated it like a sneeze guard. That, they didn't, that way you didn't sneeze on them. I mean, I have less of an issue with the plexiglass than I do with the face diapers. I
oh
really,
yeah.
those things were
But the whole
pointless.
idea of everybody touching your
Yeah,
stuff anyway, and then you're going to put
I
up, come
know, right?
on, you just touched all my stuff. So what?
Well,
And
listen,
they,
but
they,
you had the
and
people with the gloves on, John. They wore
right.
gloves, and they
And they,
took their packages home and they sprayed them with Lysol.
I guess the biggest problem is
Hey, come on.
the government, the quote unquote experts, starting with Fauci, they lied about everything from day one. From day
Yes.
one. And now we
Yeah.
know all of it. And the fact that they've done nothing to Anthony Fauci probably drives me more crazy than the fact that they haven't gotten to removing Mayorkas and Biden yet. Because Tony Fauci is responsible for the deaths of countless thousands of people because he lied from the beginning.
Well,
They lied about
let
the
me
origin.
explain to
They
you
lied about
why.
hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. They lied about everything. Also, they could market that vaccine and they could get millions and millions and millions in profits. That's it. Bottom line.
Yeah, let me tell you why they could get away with that. Because there's something called the Immunity Act, um, and of course, it was effective beginning February 4th, 2020, and it runs through October of 24. And it says that manufacturers, distributors, program managers, qualified persons, and their officials, agents, employees authorized to prescribe, administer, deliver, distribute, or dispense any antiviral drug, biologic, or vaccine used to treat, diagnose, cure, prevent, or mitigate COVID 19, the transmission of SARS CoV 2, or a virus mutating therefrom, or any device used in the administration of any such product, and all components and constituent materials of any such product are immune from charges or suits.
But he's not immune to lie. But he lied to Congress, and that's not in there. Well, he lied to Congress
I
up
agree
and
with you.
down, up and down. And
Well, and let's talk about that for just a quick second, folks. If you lie to Congress, or if you're subpoenaed by Congress and you don't show up, what can they do to you? They can declare you in contempt. And then guess what? Nothing unless what, John? What has to happen for you to be
unless you're Peter Navarro,
well, the Department of
he,
Justice
right?
has to decide to prosecute
Prosecute
you,
you, right?
and they're not gonna.
Unless you're a
So
Republican.
unless you're Republican, and then absolutely they will. They will
And
come
Peter
after you with
Navarro,
everything.
Peter Navarro has the best case of all because he was told and he, you know, basically stated that, look, I'm covered under executive privilege because he was the right hand man of the president. So he was told, look, this is privileged information.
Yep.
Every president has had executive privilege since then, and Biden decides that, oh no, well, Trump doesn't have that. And of course nobody says anything, and now Navarro gets, he's going to get wiped out, all because he cited executive privilege, but he was told to do that, and
Well,
rightfully
I
so.
think
You're
he
an
won't
advisor.
get. I think it's going to get appealed up to the Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court's
Oh,
going to
more than
strike those
likely, but
charges
but
down.
they're
Yeah.
bankrupting the guy in the process. I mean, he's got
Absolutely.
millions of
Same thing
dollars
they
in
did
legal
to General
fees.
Flynn.
Yep.
They did the same thing to General Flynn. They bankrupted them because it just, if you are in their hair line, their target
The
sites, you are
crosshairs. Yeah,
done.
he's yeah,
Yeah, crosshairs. Thank you. That's what I'm looking
yeah. That's all
for.
right.
I mean, you look at. I go back to the September, January 6th, and you have people there who were clearly leading things. They talk about the guy on the scaffolding. Um, they talk about people that were knocking down barriers and busting out windows and things of that nature. And a lot of those folks still haven't been brought to justice. The guy who planted the pipe bombs that they have on multiple cameras,
They can't find him.
no idea who that is, but yet they can identify a gentleman in the crowd from a photograph because of the bumps on his ear.
Right.
On his ear. Come on, this is ridiculous. And then you have the guy who's president, former president of the Proud Boys, wasn't even in D.C.,
Yeah, he
folks.
was in
Wasn't
Baltimore.
even there.
He was in
He
Baltimore.
was Baltimore. He's getting 22 years. 22 years. That's absurd.
Well, they can't.
And
They have to look. I got McCarthy a couple of days ago. He said he was
yeah,
going to release those tapes, and I was saying, well, we can't because of security reasons. Look, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it. The only reason that they won't release those tapes is it because in my opinion, it plainly shows that this whole thing was
was staged.
orchestrated to make it look like there was an insurrection to prevent President Trump from running again, because that's really the only thing they can get him on is that ridiculous 14th Amendment, which doesn't apply in this case anyway. It only applied to the people that were involved in the Confederacy, according to Professor Dershowitz. I prefer to listen to him because he's a liberal who's telling you that. You know, he's a civil rights attorney, and he's telling you that. But that's the reason they can't release those tapes. And I think I told you this the other day. Laura Loomer comes up with this issue where she has a guy who's a Ukrainian spy that comes in and out of the country that was there on January 6th talking to the shaman. They have the picture of him. And this guy, his photo in Ukraine has a nice photo with Senator McCain and Senator Graham in 2014, right? In 2014. So, you know, there was a lot of people on the grounds January 6th that the government knew that they were there, and there was a reason that they were there. And did people get riled up? Did some people get sucked into the whole thing? Of course, but that was the plan. You know, you're always, if you stage an event like that, you're always going to suck some people in, and that was the case. And there's many people who didn't do anything that ended up getting arrested and doing time anyway. You got people getting 5 years for walking through an open door and walking around the Capitol,
right?
Including grandmas.
You got grandmothers, grandmothers getting arrested.
And I'll say this one more time. I've said it from the beginning. If President Trump was going to plan an insurrection, you think it would look like that?
No, and that's what I was just looking at the definition of insurrection, and I don't even agree with this, and I wouldn't be afraid to bet that they've changed the definition of insurrection since January 6th to try to make it less.
Well, they changed the definition
specific.
Of vaccine. They can change the definition of anything.
Of course,
whatever
they changed the definition of pandemic. Remember last night?
And if you're planning an insurrection, why would you almost insist, even though it's a little out of your purview, that you have 10,000 or 20,000 National Guard troops at the ready here on January 4th? Talks to Speaker Pelosi. Said, I got these National Guard people. We're ready to go. We're expecting a big crowd. No, we don't need them. We don't want them.
Yeah.
So that's how you want to overthrow. You want to overthrow the government by by telling them here's 10,000 National Guard people.
Not only that, I mean, let's be realistic, folks. Even though there were tens of thousands of people there, there was no one armed. I don't think there were 1 million people there. That's not true, John. I was there.
Well, that's what the House claims.
Yeah.
That's what the Speaker claims. It was 1 million people.
She's a liar. Yeah. She's a liar. There was not. I wish 1 million people had shown up.
But even if there was 250, if there's 250,000 people there, that's a huge crowd. And you need crowd control. And the Capitol Police are not going to handle that, and the DC Police are not going to handle that. Look, I worked with some big crowds back in my day in the law enforcement, and even after I left. You need a lot of people. You need to show a force. And, I hate to bring the military in, but it is the Capitol. And if you're going to have 250,000 people there who, you think some might get unruly, put the guard. No, they didn't. You know what it was? This is the excuse. They didn't want the optics.
Yeah.
They didn't want the optics.
Yeah.
They didn't want the optics.
They didn't want those optics.
Right.
They wanted the optics they got.
That's exactly right.
That's what they wanted. They wanted it to look the way it
did.
They
couldn't have performed their operation with the National Guard troops there.
Correct. And yesterday, Glenn Beck had a great show, and he was interviewing a former ATF agent who was a whistleblower. He blew the whistle back during, I think, 2009 when they had the Fast and Furious debacle where the agent Terry was killed by weapons that were traced back to the Fast and Furious program, which they were supposedly going to stop gun running, and that's how they're going to shut down.
Yeah, it's like a buy and bust, right?
Right, exactly. And so he blew the whistle on that, and boy, they really came after him. So he just recently retired, and he's like, okay, boom, I'm going to come on and do your show. He couldn't do it until then. So, and he was asked questions because obviously, he worked very closely with the FBI. He did ATFE, which is not just, firearms, it's also explosives. So he said that in every situation where you're going to have a large gathering like that, there are always officers dispersed throughout and
absolutely
plain clothes. Because they've got the little earbuds in, and they're looking for that individual who is like who is doing what Epps was doing. They're looking for that guy,
right? And
they're going to remove him and isolate him so that he doesn't continue to create that. Let's go charge the beaches and all of that nonsense. So it's very clear they were in the crowd. They just weren't doing their job. They were not stopping people. They were not calling for police to come in and remove individuals who were doing the things they shouldn't have been doing. I mean, there's plenty of footage out there that shows protesters yelling at the police officers, arrest this guy. What are you doing? Arrest him. Look at what arrest him. He's not with us. And the police just stood there like, I don't see nothing.
The real tell is that I'm sure if you saw the Tucker Carlson interview with the chief of police, the Capitol Police,
Yeah,
who had more information than anybody I've ever heard, by far. He was never called to testify on January 6th. The guy is the
correct.
chief of police. He was never called
Yeah,
to testify, and he spelled it out. Who
yeah,
was responsible for what? He had more information. That's probably one of the best 50 minutes of TV you'll ever see. And the guy is unbelievable when it comes to how solid his story is. You're looking at him
yeah,
and go, this guy's a straight shooter, no pun
yep.
intended. And they never called him. Why not? They didn't want to hear what he had to say.
Right,
He's
exactly.
going to
Because
tell the truth. It doesn't fit the narrative.
yeah, he's gonna he wasn't gonna talk the narrative. He's gonna tell their story,
One,
which is not the
yeah.
story that we
One more
want to
thing
hear
about
or
lying.
need to hear.
Yeah, one more thing about lying at Congress. Obviously, it's punishable, but the DOJ has to follow through on that.
Right.
But what if the people that are swearing you in are lying? Which is what
Yeah.
the House members did. All of those people know the truth. All of them
Yep.
that testified up there. It
Yep.
doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, Liz Cheney, anybody that was on that committee, they all lied and they all knew it.
They should be
So
impeached.
they should, yeah. Well, it's worse than lying to Congress. You are
Yeah.
Congress and you're lying
Yeah.
and you're holding a
Yeah.
sham hearing. And here's the other
I
thing
think it's treason,
with
personally.
Navarro, with Navarro's case is he was charged with lying to Congress, but the committee that he supposedly lied to, or he didn't lie to Congress, he basically refused to testify.
Right. More
Right?
or
He
less
didn't
gave
lie to
fifth.
Congress.
Yeah.
He refused. He said that I'm covered by executive privilege. He didn't lie to
Right.
Congress. He just said he
Yep.
wasn't going to testify. So he was held in contempt of Congress.
Right.
But here's the case: the committee was illegal. It was
Yes.
illegal because there has to be a certain makeup of committee according to the rules of the House and the Senate,
Correct.
and they have to be reflective of the proportionality of Republicans and
Mm-hmm.
Democrats in the House. And there were very few Republicans on the committee. It didn't work.
Right.
And Speaker
Yeah.
McCarthy
So
wasn't
if
able
there's
to put those people on.
70% Democrat and 30% Republican, then that means, and there's 10, that means 7 can be Democrat, 3 have to be
Right.
Republican. That's the
Exactly
way
right.
it's got to be. So
But it
yeah.
wasn't that at
No.
all. And
No.
and the speaker, well, he was the minority leader at the time. He wasn't allowed to put who he wanted to put on that committee. He wanted Jim Jordan on there. And they were like,
Oh
no,
yeah.
no, no, we're not putting Jim Jordan. Are you crazy? So
Yeah.
so
He
the
makes too much
committee was
sense.
illegal, and you
Yeah.
get charged for refusing to testify or responding to a subpoena from an illegal committee.
Right.
So
Well, my theory is even if they take him and try to charge him, he still has the right to plead the fifth. And you can't just find him guilty. That's not how
right.
that works.
Well, he just
You better
yeah.
have evidence,
Well,
and they don't have it. So it's just, it's so frustrating to watch our country slowly, actually not even
no, it's
slowly
not
anymore,
slowly. Yeah,
rapidly
it's going in a hurry.
disintegrating from
In
what
a
it's
hurry,
supposed to be. And it's really frightening. I think
and at the state level too.
um, Dershowitz, who we just talked about, I mentioned this before, he actually has this scale that he, calls the bananas. He
Yeah, the
says,
bananas.
once we get to 10 bananas, we are now a banana republic. And we're currently sitting on 6, leaning toward, actually, we're 6.5. We're at 6.5 bananas now. So we might very rapidly be at 10, and then we'll be a banana. I submit that we're already a banana republic.
Yeah.
The fact that we are charging a former sitting president and the current leading opponent to the incumbent with crimes that are anything but actual
Right.
crimes is beyond disturbing. And I just hope that the American people wake up. And to that end, I want to touch on a little bit more that we talked about last night, which is people getting involved in voting. And of course, a lot of people are tuned in to the fact that the presidential primaries are occurring here in South Carolina in February. Now, February 4th is a Democratic primary. It'll be interesting to see if it is actually Joe. I have a feeling, I think we've all said this, we strongly suspect he will not be the guy. I think by around the middle or early part of October, he is going to be uh, going bye-bye, and we're going to have somebody else as the potential nominee for the Democratic Party. And then the second presidential primary is the Republican primary here in South Carolina on February 24th. Now, that is not the last primary in South Carolina, folks, because everybody's up for reelection. All of the members of the House, both at the federal level and at the state level. I don't think either of our senators our U.S.
No,
senators
they're
are
not.
up for reelection. They're both
Next time.
next time. Yeah,
Yeah,
or one of them.
Graham's
I
20,
think Lindsay's next
2026.
time. Yeah.
2026.
So but we do have a lot of local political offices that are up for reelection. It's absolutely crucial that you register and that you vote in the primary. Please, that's June 11th, 2024. So there's 2 primaries that you as Republicans better vote in: February 24th and June 11th. It's it's actually even more important that you vote in those elections than it is that you vote in the general election. And I know you may think, well, that's crazy. No, it's not, because you're going to determine who the candidate is going to be. And in most counties, particularly like here in Horry County, whichever person wins the Republican primary is going to be the winner in the general, just because of the way that it sets out demographically speaking. That's the way it's going to be. So if you're waiting to vote in the general and you're skipping the primary, you're making a tremendous mistake, and you're allowing less than 1% of the people to decide for you who the candidate and the eventual winner is going to be. That's what you're
It,
doing.
yeah, and you really, one of the reasons that you have to get involved is because we have this open primary here, which is ridiculous in my opinion. You
Yeah.
have to offset the votes of the Democrats who cross over to vote
Hmm.
for this, the
The
squishy
squishy.
Republicans. I mean, that's what you have to
Yeah.
do. So you have to offset that group, because they don't vote in the Democrat primary; they vote in the Republican primary, and they end up controlling that particular primary, and that's why we get what we get in Columbia.
That's why we get Luke Rankin.
I
Luke
mean,
Rankin's a Democrat.
and you know what
Carla
too?
Schuessler, Democrat.
I hate to go down this road, but I'm getting very suspicious of people who identify themselves as conservatives, because what does that mean anymore?
Hmm.
It may mean that you believe socially in social issues, you're conservative, but you believe in big government. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
Then you're not a
Yeah.
conservative. If you are,
Right.
say you're a conservative and then you think the government is the answer and not the
Yeah.
problem, well, then you're
You're
not
the
a
problem.
conservative at all. You're the
Hmm.
problem. I think
Exactly.
we have to
Yep.
like maybe rebrand ourselves as like right wing populists or something. This is about we
Yeah.
the people, and it's about small government, and it's about federalism. That's what it should be about. And that's what quote unquote conservatives should be. But there's far too many people running around saying they're conservatives and they believe that the government is always the answer. The government is the problem. The government is not the answer.
Yeah, I love Ronald Reagan's famous quote where he said, "The scariest words you'll ever hear. I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Yep. Absolutely,
Run
absolutely true.
away.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, they're never a help. Now, I will admit to you, or submit to you rather, that there are people who go into office with the intent to help. I do believe that. I do believe we have
Oh
good
yeah.
people that go into office, um, and then they find themselves, sort of stuck in the muck and the mire, trying to fight their way across, whatever you want to call it, the swamp, whatever. Um, so we need to put more of those individuals in. Right now, there's such a minority. Like even here in South Carolina, I went to a training a couple weekends ago, and we had a representative there, Mr. Jack White, Mr. Joe White, rather, Mr. Joe White, and he made the point that we have a supermajority, okay, and the problem is because we have a supermajority, so many of those Republicans are, as you've called them, squishy Republicans. So it's very difficult for the conservatives to get anything through. For example, we have 17 members of the Freedom Caucus that are conservative. Now, we had some folks that said they were, Freedom Caucus members, and then they really weren't, or they said they were going to caucus with them, and then they didn't. I'm very disappointed in Matt Lieber because he ran with help from the Freedom Caucus and others saying that he was going to caucus with them, and then the first thing he did was he choked and he signed the loyalty oath, and so now he's with the establishment folks. But what that means is that they do not have the voting power like they need. So, for example, if you look at what happened in the U.S. Capitol, the U.S. Congress, you have a very was it five vote majority?
Yeah, 5 vote.
Yeah.
Right.
So the Freedom Caucus, made up of 20, I think it's 20
Yeah, it's
people,
20.
had tremendous influence over what was going to go forward. Kevin McCarthy is a great example. He almost didn't get, made speaker because they were like, nope, you're going to give us
Yeah.
these concessions. So anyway, Representative White from South Carolina made the point that if we just had 55 more Democrats, we'd still have a majority, but we wouldn't have the supermajority. And what that would then force the leadership within the Republican Party to do is they would have to work with the Freedom Caucus. They would have to work with true conservatives to get things done. And they wouldn't be able to just ignore them when they say crony capitalism is wrong. You can't give billions of dollars to anybody. You can't give the taxpayer money to some select business that you want to be successful and tell the rest of the business owners, sorry, go pound sand. That would be something that they could have actually put a stop to. But because we have this, alleged supermajority, they're not able to actually have a voice. So it's very important, folks, that again, I can't emphasize this enough. Yes, vote February 24th in the presidential primary. That's important. But please don't think your job is done. Then on June 11th, you have to vote again in the GOP primary to make sure the people that we send to the state house whether it be to the House or to the state Senate, whether it be to the city councils or the county council, please make certain those folks are genuine conservatives. Ask them the questions. What do you think is true? Ask them a question about taxes. What would you vote in favor of to raise taxes to pay for? And if they give you an answer that's outside of, defense or infrastructure, that's a big no,
Right.
no. That's all taxes are supposed to take care of. I don't want to hear about, well, we need this new community center. No, we don't. Not my tax dollars, we don't. If you want to have a community center, do a fundraising, do a GoFundMe, do something else. That's not where tax dollars are supposed to be sent, okay? If the people want that, the people will then make sure that happens using their dollars as they see fit. Let's give more dollars back to the people, and then they can choose what and how they want to spend that money, as opposed to giving it to the government, who then decides where they're going to spend it or what crony capitalism they're going to put into place. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have such a problem with, for example, the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce. They're getting somewhere between $50 to $54 million a year, supposedly to advertisements to bring people into the beach for, tourists. The problem with that is, we all know that a lot of that money gets siphoned off to various PACs so that they can support the candidates who are going to help pad their pockets even more.
Get them more
That
money.
has to stop. And not for nothing, but I hope you realize we are not even able to audit all of that money that goes to the chamber. We have no way of knowing how they spend it, what they do with it, because they are a private organization, John,
Right. Non
but
for
they're getting
profit.
public dollars.
A non for profit that gets $54 million a year
It's
in
disgusting.
tax and grants. Right. And what are they really doing to promote business? I mean, obviously, the probably the best way to promote your general area is to cut down on crime, clean up
Yes.
the streets,
Yep.
have better infrastructure. That's the way you approach it. First thing, you got to get rid of the reputation that it's a crime ridden area, and unfortunately, there are parts of Myrtle Beach that have that reputation. I used to hear that up
Yep.
north. You're moving to Myrtle Beach? Really?
Yeah.
I live south of there, but when they heard that area, I have some bad things about Myrtle Beach. This is in New York, and
Yeah.
meanwhile, they decide to spend millions running commercials up north, saying, "Hey, come to Myrtle Beach. It's great. Show you
Yeah.
all the pictures and everything." Yeah, it's
Yep.
great, but it doesn't work. You have to
Mm-hmm.
the best advertisement is always people. And when people come down here, they need to go home and say, "Hey, man, we had a great time. The
Yeah. Word of mouth. Yeah.
place was spotless. The motels are great. The restaurants are great. No crime on the streets. Nobody hanging around. Nobody panhandling. Nobody living in the street." That's what people want to see when they go on vacation.
Right.
You know, they're trying to
That's
get away
exactly
from
right.
exactly that. You don't want to go to a place that has the same thing that you have in your town, except they have sand.
Right, right, exactly. It's funny you should say that, because last night I was watching some videos on YouTube. I usually, if I can't catch Gutfield, I'll go through YouTube and watch some of the clips of his show. And so I watched the clip, and then I automatically went to another video, and it was a video from this past summer of the little car fender bender that happened.
Oh yeah, with the
And then the
shooting.
guy goes up to the truck and shoots into the truck, and I thought, well, that's fabulous. That's still on the internet. So, great promotion
Yeah,
for Myrtle
yeah,
Beach. Come to Myrtle Beach, you might
yeah.
get shot,
Yeah, the internet
or
never
you could
forgets.
get robbed.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
internet never
so
forgets. It's always
you're
there.
absolutely right. The chamber could do a lot more good if they help to get rid of the trash and the filth that's on the street, and if they help to put more officers on the street to make sure that it is filled with law-abiding citizens and not, thugs.
Yeah, and you need
That's
judges
not
who are
what we
going to
need.
put people away.
Yes. Yeah. Which, once again,
Not keep letting people out. You don't want to
yeah,
you don't want to put people out that shouldn't be on the street. I believe this. I mean, I am not a Trey Gowdy fan.
right.
Let me just say that. But the one point that he made, I think, is absolutely legit, is that 5% of the people in this country are bad, and the government's job is to keep that 5% away from the other 95%. That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense to me. It makes a
Hmm.
lot of sense. It's about as plain as you can get, but I think it's true, and we do a very poor job of that in many locations, keeping that
Yeah.
5%. In fact, it's probably bigger than 5% because we keep letting them out. So why wouldn't you join the 5% if you're going to get away with everything you want to get away with? Where it used to be you had deterrent, and the deterrent was, hey, you're going to get 10 years in jail. Now you're not going to get 10 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's frustrating. And then we've talked many times before about the way in which the judges are selected here in South Carolina and Virginia, the only two states in the union that do it that way, is through the legislators, who get to select the judges, and the lawyer legislators or anything but above board. And that's, again, I know it's like beating a dead horse, but we have to keep reminding folks that it is not okay to have an attorney, legislator, select a judge, because then that judge is going to be, whether it's overt or covert, they're going
Right.
to owe an allegiance to that particular legislator. So when he or she goes before that judge with one of their cases, the judge is going to more than likely be a little bit more lenient and lean towards their victory rather than,
And
having a
uh,
blind justice system we're supposed to have.
and I think it's more of a problem here because the legislature only meets for 5 months, which in some ways is a good thing because they can only do
Right.
so much bad in 5 months.
Right.
But the other
But
part of
boy,
that
can they.
is in the other 7 months, what are these people doing for a living? A lot of them are
Yeah.
attorneys, like you said,
Yeah.
and they're trying cases. Like if you're a full-time legislature, if you're an attorney, you really don't have any time to try cases. You're kind of on hold from your law firm
Mm-hmm.
and you're at the state house and you're a full-time legislator, so you're not going to have the time. But when you have a job that you're offering to people for 5 months, yeah, you're going to serve, but there's a
Yep.
very limited group of people who can put their lives on hold for 5 months and go to
Mm-hmm.
Columbia and quote unquote do the work of the people, right?
Right.
Very few, very small select group. And one of those groups is law firms because
Mm-hmm.
look, they have other
That's
lawyers to
it.
pick up the slack. And then when you go back, you get to try cases in front of somebody that you just put on the bench. It doesn't get any
Right.
worse than that, folks.
Right. And then you have another group. You have realtors again. That they have that flexibility because they can kind of work from anywhere, if you will.
Builders,
And yeah, your builders. And then you have kind of the last group, and they seem to be the smallest group, but retirees, people that are, have retired from their careers or whatever, and they're now free to do that. There's not very many of them, but Mr. Joe White's a great example of someone who's retired and said, "Look, I can't sit back and watch the future of my grandkids being flushed down the drain." So he got involved. But we need people to do that. We need people to get involved. And it starts again with making sure you register to vote. It's a very simple thing to do. And they don't pull from the voter registration anymore and assign you jury duty. That's not a thing. So please don't use that as your excuse. I can't register to vote.
no,
They'll have me for jury. No, it's not
that's a
it. Okay,
driver's
they don't do
license
anything.
thing.
It's your driver's license
It's
now,
a
buddy. If you
driver's
got a
license.
driver's license, they can call you up.
That's all. And I
So
could tell you how that happened in New York. It was a quick story.
yeah,
When I registered, when I registered to vote, somehow on when I registered for my driver's license, rather, somehow on my driver's license they misspelt my address.
row.
They used an O instead of an I on my
Yeah,
driver's license, so I had to go get it
yeah,
corrected. But in the file, I guess it never got corrected because when I got my jury duty notice, it had the
yeah,
same misspelling of the address. So that's how I knew that it came from my
yeah.
driver's license and not my voter registration. I knew right
Right.
away. I mean, that's too coincidental, right? The same
Yeah,
misspelling, yeah. Because
yeah.
when it went into the system that I had registered, I had to acquire my driver's license because I moved. I had to get changed. Same misspelling. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's the truth everywhere. It comes off your driver's license and guess what? Your tax returns.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
pay taxes,
So
you're gonna go to jury duty.
right, right, and it's it's not that big a deal. I mean,
No,
we have to do it as part of our civic
she's
responsibility.
exactly right.
But yeah, please register to vote and then vote. I mean, I'm gonna beat this drum endlessly because it has to be beaten. I live in a neighborhood now with at the time about 750 homes, and we had the primary, and I did not win. And the guy who did win shared with me how many people voted in my neighborhood, and it was 44 households,
Out of,
44 out of
out of 750.
750.
Yeah, which is like 7%, right? Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That
It's ridiculous. Yeah,
is sickening. And it was so frustrating to me that I wanted to go and I did actually. I knocked on every door of the people that I had that voted, and if they answered, I said thank you. I shook their hand and thanked them, and some of them said, "Well, I voted for you," and I said, "Yeah, I knew him, but thank you." And then so how did you know? And I said, "Well, it's public record. If you vote in
if
Republican
you vote,
primary," and then
right,
and that's where we get some of that what you talked about earlier. Occasionally, you knock on a door and it's a Democrat. Why are you? I'm a Democrat. I'm like, well, stop voting in Republican primaries.
right.
That's all I can tell you. Okay, don't vote Republican primaries if you're a Democrat and you don't want to be bothered by Republicans. Very simple. Um, but it's so frustrating to hear people complain about, and you should be complaining. The country is in terrible condition right now. Our economy sucks. I don't care what Joe Biden tries to tell you. I'm sorry. In
and
2020,
it's
I
going
was
to get
paying
worse.
like $1.85 a gallon for gas, and now I ain't paying that. It's over $3 in some places, close to
Yeah.
$3 in others. So it is just, um, it's ridiculous, and the cost of food is insane. I can't even, like, we went out to eat. My husband and my son and I went out to eat at Outback, and I haven't been there in a while. And I know I used to always get the Alice Springs chicken, and in the beginning it was around $12, and then it went to like 16. We went. It's $20 for a
For
piece of
chicken, for
chicken.
chicken, for
I'm
chicken.
like, are you kidding me? That's insane.
Yep.
So a salad was $17. Anyway, it just, and it wasn't even a good salad. I got the salad, and it came with what I would call maybe 2 ounces of chicken, if you will, chicken. And they didn't even use good lettuce. They didn't use a romaine lettuce. They
Yeah, the
used
iceberg,
lettuce, which is
iceberg.
crappy and cheap, has zero nutritional value whatsoever. I remember that because I worked at the CDC in Texas, and the director used to get so mad if the kitchen ordered that. She just doesn't have any nutritional value. Stop feeding our kids
It's
rubbish.
and you go to Costco or something, any one of those places, Sam's Club, whatever. You spend 200, it's 300 for the same stuff. I mean, it's
Yes.
anecdotal, but it's true. I mean, the
Yes.
prices are just outrageous, and you're forced to do without some things, and then you're also forced to be a bit more, use a bit more discretion when you're shopping. You're looking for sales. Not that I didn't always
Right.
do that. I always look for a
Right.
bargain. Everybody does, but you really have to be judicious in what you're doing, especially for people on a fixed income.
Yes.
And then the
Yeah.
other tell on that, and this is something that really kills the debt and the deficit, is that Social Security, and rightfully so, has a cost of living adjustment every year. Well, guess what? If you're on Social Security last time, you got almost a 10% raise.
Yeah.
What does that cost? What does that cost the government? And it does cost the
Hmm.
government, cost the taxpayer. Taxpayers to pay for things. Social Security money is not there. We all know that. But you got to think about that. As inflation goes up, the colas are tied to inflation. So when President Trump was in office and inflation was 2%, well, you're only getting a
Hmm.
2% raise. But guess what? That's better. You're better off.
Yeah.
You're better
Yep.
off. Now you're getting an 8-9% raise, but everything else is up more than that,
Right.
and
It's up
you're not
11%.
catching up.
Yeah.
You're just not catching up.
Yeah.
So you're quote unquote getting
Yeah.
more money, but it's buying less.
Yeah. Well, let me jump back real quickly and
Sure.
talk a little bit about Governor McMaster.
And DHEC.
And DHEC. We last night we were talking about it, and DHEC is the agency that has been given authority to pass. I don't want to say laws, because
No,
they don't
they're
have
not.
that constitutional authority, but they're
Nope.
basically kind of saying, one of the things we read, it actually said that if the legislature passes a law, before it can be put into effect, it has to be reviewed by DHEC. And I'm like, where is that in the Constitution? Please point that out to me. That's unconstitutional. And
At every
with
level.
a Congress full of lawyers, somebody should have stood up and said, this isn't going to pass muster. Sorry, we're not doing
Yeah.
that. But that's not happening. And McMaster seems to think that he's got up there and he said, we're not going to allow, people to be forced to wear a mask in public locations. We're not going to allow people to be forced to get, he said everything but the jab. He did not mention the jab. And that was a little concerning to me that he didn't mention that. Um, and then, to be totally honest, he left out some of the most important areas. Like, if you work for a private company, he basically said, hands off. We're not going to tell your boss that he can't make you wear a mask or make you take a vaccine that's experimental. Um, and I think she was right that violates, anyway, I'm just
Yeah,
so frustrated with what's happening.
it is an interesting line to walk, because you don't want to interfere with private business. I mean,
Right.
I'm against that, but
Agreed.
I know that what they put into effect basically said that they have to give you unemployment, and they think that that's enough of a deterrent, that now they're paying your unemployment insurance because they fired you.
Right.
So if they fire enough people, it's very costly to the employer, because he's got to
Yeah.
pay all that unemployment insurance. I get that, so I understand the hesitation to wade into the privacy, but it also says in the Nuremberg codes that you can never do that. You can never force anybody, and that's force. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Holding
That is
somebody's
force.
holding somebody's job over their head is force.
Yep. Yeah.
That you can't say it any other way. You have bills to pay, you got a mortgage to pay, you got tuitions to
Yep.
pay, you got a student loan to pay, whatever you have to pay. All of a sudden, you're out on the street because you got fired. That's forceful.
Yep.
So all of those laws should go. And I think the big tell is they really need to rethink the name of DHEC, because the last word is control,
Yeah.
and that offends me as much as mandate does. All right,
Yeah.
in a representative democracy, there should be no mandates and there should be no
Correct.
control. All right, other
Hmm.
than the laws that we the people want to put in place.
Right.
And when you're reading this, you're realizing that we didn't vote for any of this stuff.
Correct.
That that DHEC, it looks like they could override the will of we the people that was
Yep.
presented by the legislature. That's no good.
Yeah. So I hope that one of our legislatures has enough courage to stand up and say, I think this is unconstitutional, and I want to make you know, a law that strikes it down, takes away that power that they really didn't have anyway. Um, but it'll be interesting to see, because he did the big gates of hell speech before, but we won't allow it. They did put a law in place that said you couldn't force people who were coming into your restaurant or your hotel or any kind of public space like that to either wear a mask or to have some evidence that they've been vaccinated. Now I know in New York, as my aunt went, there were many places that required you to show some sort of vaccine card showing
Yep.
that you'd been vaccinated in order to get in. That's wholly unconstitutional. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, John, but I think there was a group of nurses who just sued in New York, or it might have been New Jersey, to get their jobs back because they refused to take the jab, and they
Well,
actually won,
well,
and
I
they
know in New York,
getting back pay. Yeah,
in New York, the public school teachers, and
yeah,
it was thousands of people. So
yeah.
now they have to pay back pay to all of those people for 3 years.
So
Now
it was New York. Okay, yeah, that's
those
what I
people's
thought.
lives
Yeah.
got completely upended.
Hmm.
But if you're teaching up there and you have seniority, you're making six figures up there easy. So you're
Yeah,
talking about paying people, three hundred
a
thousand
lot of
dollars back
money.
pay, plus
Yeah,
any medical bills that they accrued because they no longer had insurance.
yeah.
So you got to cover all of that. I mean, this is the city, of course, never thinks this stuff through,
No, no.
and it's same thing. And now the same thing's going to follow for cops, and the same thing's going to follow for firemen, and the same thing's going to follow for everybody because the teachers won, and now you got to pay everybody that happened to. And there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of cops and firemen in particular, firefighters. Sorry, uh, there was a lot of them that didn't do it. They just didn't do it because they
Yeah,
refused. So now, guess
right.
what? Now they all have to get back pay, and like I said, any medical bills that they accrued during that time because they lost their medical coverage.
Now I know I was speaking to Lieutenant Governor Pamela Vett when that was kind of all first coming out in the colleges and things like that. Were forcing students to be vaccinated in order to attend the schools. And I said, how can this be? And she said, well, all I can say is that when one of the students is, injured, vaccine injured, or sues, that these schools are going to regret that decision. And so I hope that starts happening. I hope that if there were any students in any universities across our state who were forced to, either drop out or to, take an emergency experimental drug, that they sue those schools and that they are paid and forced to pay the price because that is not okay. And speaking of schools in South Carolina, I want to talk a little bit about what we just got released to us from an organization that is referred to as FIRE. It is the 2024 College Free Speech Index report. There are 254 universities and colleges across the United States that are basically ranked in terms of whether or not they uphold the freedom of speech on the campus. And the University of South Carolina came in at the bottom five. Now, Harvard
Harvard
was
was
dead
first, right? Yeah,
last.
they were first or last, right?
Dead. They were 254th out of that list. That means they got a score of zero. That's how bad they were. They got a score of zero. Michigan Technological University is top ranked, free speech. Auburn University, the University of New Hampshire, Oregon State, and Florida State University round out the top five schools. Harvard University obtained the lowest score possible at zero and is the only school with an abysmal speech climate rating. The University of Pennsylvania, the University of South Carolina, Georgetown University, and Fordham University also rounded and ranked in the bottom five. Now, the key factors differentiating the high performing schools, the top five, from the poorly performing schools were the following. The components concluded they had to have tolerance of difference, disruptive conduct. Students from the schools in the bottom five were more biased towards allowing controversial liberal speakers on campus over conservative ones and were more accepting of students using disruptive and violent forms to protest or stop campus speech. Deplatforming attempts that occurred at schools ranked in the bottom 5 had an alarming 81% success rate. So, in other words, they would try to deplatform somebody to prevent them from speaking, and that was 81% of the time successful. That is horrifying. More than half of students, 56%, expressed worry about damaging their reputation because of someone misunderstanding what they had said or done. And just over a quarter, 26% of students reported that they feel pressure to avoid discussing controversial topics in their classes. 20% reported that they often self censor. In other words, they start to say something and they think, I better not say that. That might cost me my job or I might get kicked out of school. Then, when provided with the definition of self censorship, at least a quarter of students said that they self censor fairly often or very often during conversations with other students, with professors, and during classroom discussions, respectively 25, 27, and 28%. So, what that means is you go to the university to be able to debate ideas. And if you are limited in debating the ideas because you're afraid your idea might be offensive to somebody, then we're only having a discussion about a very few points of view. And that is not an education that's worth even getting. You're paying outrageous amounts of money for a worldview that is really not representative of the world's views. And that's disturbing. Almost half of students surveyed, 49%, said that abortion is a difficult topic to have an open and honest conversation about on campus. A notable portion of students also identified gun control, racial inequity, transgender rights as topics that were difficult to discuss 43%, 42%, and 42%, respectively. Opposition to allowing controversial conservative speakers on campus raised from 57 to 72%, depending on the speaker. I, Listen, you can have an opinion. You're absolutely free to have an opinion. You can say, I don't like. I remember at Coastal Carolina, David Duke was coming to speak. Now he's the former KKK guy,
Yeah.
and he was running for
Yeah.
president. I didn't go see the guy because he didn't represent anything of my values. But I did not have a problem with him coming and speaking to anybody that wanted to hear him. Now, I don't have an issue with people having a counter speech, if you will, someone who's outside saying, okay, he believes this, I believe this. I think that's perfectly fine. Or if they have, he gets to come and speak, and then the next day they get somebody else who is, differs from him to kind of like refute anything that he said that they didn't agree with. I don't have a problem with that. But, to go into that room and try to shut him down, no, because people should be allowed to hear that sort of ignorance, but they should also be able to hear why it's ignorance.
Yeah, you have
And
to
you
be
can't do
exposed.
that.
Yeah, it's the main component of an education, especially at that level, is being exposed to ideas that you don't think you agree with. Hey, you might get convinced otherwise, but you'll never
Yeah.
know unless you get exposed to those ideas. And I think the real tell here is like you'll have. I remember years ago, Columbia University had Ahmadinejad from Iran speak,
Yes.
and
Yes.
with an unbelievably anti-Semitic
Positive
message,
review.
right? And he spoke there. Now, if that's your university and you want to have him speak there, well, I guess it's your call. But
Right.
you have to have Charlie Kirk come in too. And
Yes.
if Charlie Kirk comes in, there's a riot
Yes.
because the people who preach tolerance are the least tolerant among us by far.
Absolutely.
They do not want to
Absolutely.
hear anything that might make them think. Bottom line, and
Yeah.
I'm a Fordham graduate. I went to Fordham, right,
Yep.
and Georgetown as well. Georgetown's fourth on the list, and
Yeah.
Fordham's fifth. Those are both Jesuit schools. They're both Catholic schools. Well, I shouldn't say that because the Jesuits there's a
Well, I mean,
discussion as to
Harvard
whether.
started out as
Yeah.
a
Oh, all the Ivy League schools started as
Christian.
divinity
Yeah.
schools. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
divinity schools. But
Seminaries.
Georgetown and the Pope is the Jesuit. So we'll leave it right there. I mean,
Right. Right.
I won't go any further.
Well,
But I'm
that
embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that Fordham is on that list because when I went to Fordham, it's 30 years ago when I went back to school. But it was a free flow and exchange of ideas. That's what college is about. I
right.
don't care if you're offended, and far too many people are offended by they're offended by which way the wind's blowing.
Right.
You have to get over yourselves, and that's why there's so many people honestly that can't function in this society is because they're offended by everything. What we have
Yeah.
created through this education system are victims and not citizens.
Well, listen to this statistic. It said more than 2 in 5 students, which is 45%, said that students blocking other students from attending a speech is acceptable to some degree, and up to 37% did that last year. Said that last year, and more than a quarter of students, 27%, said that using violence to stop a campus speech was acceptable. That's
Right.
up from 20% last year. So the idea that it's okay to use violence, that's appalling. More than 1 in 5 students said that their college administration's stance on free speech on campus is not clear, and more than a quarter of students reported that it's unlikely their college administration would defend a speaker's right to express his or her views if a controversy occurred on campus. That I don't even know. I mean, that's sickening to my stomach to think that we have a
Yeah,
situation like that.
I guess the real issue is that these people, they're no longer liberals. You know,
Yeah,
Professor Dershowitz is a liberal,
right.
right? And he is the champion.
Bill Maher is a
Yeah,
liberal.
he's the champ. But Professor Dershowitz is the champion of free speech. He is.
Yeah.
He'll tell you flat out that he's defended Nazis. I mean, he's an
Mm-hmm.
observant Jew, and he's defended Nazis and their right
Yeah.
to speak freely because he
Yeah.
feels that it's important because that's what the Constitution is all about. This guy is professor emeritus at Harvard. He
Yeah.
must be beyond embarrassed that that's
Yeah.
happened to that institution because this place was the bastion of liberalism and free speech, and now it's nothing more than fascist. That's what it is. That's what fascism is. They're
Yeah.
not allowing people to have the free exchange of ideas, and you're not getting an education. You're getting an
That's exactly
indoctrination,
right.
and it's at every
Exactly.
level. It starts in pre-K and it goes all the way up to the
Mm-hmm.
top.
Yep, 100%. And that's why it's so important, again, folks, that you get involved in the local races, because this can be mitigated if we get the right people on the school board, if we get the right people at the head of these places, superintendents and so on and so forth. We got to have folks that understand free speech and are advocates of free speech. We can't have people like the governor from New Mexico who believes that, you can declare an emergency for some reason and suspend the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. Because as John and I were discussing before the show starts, there's no fine print in the Constitution that says, except during an emergency, in which case all of these things become null and void, because they're God-given rights. The first 10 are God-given. They're not given to us by the government. They are protected from the government trying to take them away. So I think she is currently facing impeachment. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, there's people or not, I don't know. I mean, it's a Democrat-controlled legislature, but I'll tell you what, it's going to make it very difficult for the Democrats come election time. And I heard somebody say this the other night, and it's true. New Mexico's now in play when it comes to 2024. Right. I don't care because believe me, there are plenty of Democrat gun owners out there. So, it's not, again, it's not New York. There's a gun culture there, and people don't want to lose that right no matter who they are. They want to be able to protect themselves, or protect their homes, or protect their families. And, the only time in the Constitution, I mean, I'm not a constitutional scholar and I'm not a lawyer, but the only time it says that the president can suspend a writ of habeas corpus is during an open rebellion. Mm-hmm. That's it. So during the Civil War, Lincoln did that. He suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Well, they were in open rebellion. And even that was questionable, the lengths that they went to. So when you have a governor saying, hey, look, you know what, things are bad, so, forget the Constitution. We're taking your guns. Beyond belief, just beyond belief. Well, and now, guess what? I hope she gets run out. She should get run out.
Yes. And I think that there was a group of people sitting at the table with her, sheriffs and other law enforcement agencies, and none of them said anything in support of her, but they also didn't say anything at that time in opposition to her. And that was a little disappointing. But now later, the sheriff was kind of asked about it, and he said, there's no way. He said that she doesn't have the authority to do that. Right. You can't. And so in essence, he was not going to enforce that. He was not going to go out and start taking people's weapons. And that's a good thing because he didn't have the constitutional authority to do so. And the reason why we often talk about our sheriffs is because they are kind of like the last line of defense against an overbearing government, because they take an oath and they're elected. So
right. And my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you get sworn in as a sheriff all around the country, you are charged with, when you take your oath, that they talk about upholding the Constitution. Correct. When I got sworn in, to be a police officer in New York City, I got sworn in to enforce the laws of New York State.
Correct.
Not the Constitution. I'm not doing it. We're not doing. If we had anything that would involve the feds, we had to notify the feds. It's not true of the sheriffs. That's my understanding, that it's not true of the sheriffs, that they talk about the Constitution in their oath. Not the case with local law enforcement. You're enforcing the laws of the, and obviously if you're at that level too, you're still not going to enforce anything that you think is unconstitutional. At least you should bring it up to somebody. But the sheriffs are that's a different animal. And there was one sheriff out there who was quite outspoken and came right out to the press, said, "Look, I'm not enforcing this. I'm not doing it
Hmm.
because it's unconstitutional. I'm charged with
Hmm.
enforcing the Constitution, and that's what I'm going to do."
Yep. And that's what we have to have more and more of, because we have to have pushback against this. And that's why, we were saying last night that if they start trying to say you got to wear this, you got to wear this mask, you got to do this, there has to be a unified front that says we will not comply. We will not comply. And if we stand together, there are more of us than there are of them. And I don't say that in any kind of a, this is not me trying to declare an insurrection. So don't, FBI, I know you're listening. Don't think that's what it means. It just simply says that we can say, no, the Constitution protects my rights, which are God given, and you can't thwart those. Full stop. So therefore, I'm not going to comply with an illegal, unconstitutional mandate. Because first of all, mandates are not laws, folks. There's no
Right.
law that says you have to wear a mask. Um, an ordinance is not a law. None of the things that they put forward are laws. The only thing you have to follow is a law that has been put through Congress and approved and signed into law. And in some cases, that can be appealed to the Supreme Court because maybe that law is unconstitutional.
And this is why when you watch television, no matter what you're watching, you
Yeah.
will see the pretender in chief, Biden, or you will see Mayorkas, or you will see Christopher Wray continuing on the thread that the biggest threat that we face as a country is domestic terrorism.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the reason that they're saying that is because they're going to continue to push the envelope against we
Mm-hmm.
the people until we react. And then
Yeah.
once we react, they're going to be like, see, domestic terrorism is the biggest problem.
Yes.
Meanwhile, they violated
Yeah.
every one of our rights and they're wondering
Yep.
why we're standing up for ourselves. Well, that's because they want to be in a position to when we stand up for ourselves that they can act
Yeah.
swiftly and they have enough information to put us away. Look, the Department of Justice, there's no justice in it anymore. It's gone. The rule of law is dead when it comes to them because the rule of law is not arbitrary and they're using it
Mm-hmm.
arbitrarily. They're picking and choosing. And once you pick and choose, you no longer live in a representative democracy.
Yeah, I think were our founders alive today, that we would have yet another Declaration of Independence written and declared, because it's becoming very clear that our current structure, our schools are corrupt, the agencies are corrupt, whether it's the FBI, CIA, DOJ, doesn't work. Our government is corrupt. Um, there is very little left that anybody has faith in. I mean, you ask people today, it used to be that the FBI and the CIA and the DOJ, people respected those offices, and now we're just like, no, I don't trust anything they say. And I don't trust anything they say. They have proven time and time and again that they are not trustworthy. And so therefore I don't put any trust in them at all. And it was interesting that, again, going back to the interview with Glenn Beck, if you haven't had a chance to hear that, go click on the Watch. It's free. Go listen to his podcast with the gentleman from ATF. And he said that they actually go through a course now, and he said he's pretty sure it's the ATF, the FBI, the CIA, and other agencies like that. The other, alphabet guys go through the same training, in which they say if you have someone in your office who's talking about the Constitution or upholding an oath or any of those buzzwords, those people are not your friend. Those people are to be suspected of, possible insurrection or ulterior motives. Really? If you say you want to adhere to and uphold the Constitution, you're now the enemy? What the actual hell is going on in our country, John?
Yeah, and you know what? I yesterday, I'm watching the ceremony from the Trade Center, the 9/11
Yeah.
ceremony, and it's difficult for everybody. I lost a lot of friends that day, and I've lost way more since from 9/11 related cancers and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think back to that time, and then I think back to the Patriot Act and the fact that we all thought it was a good idea that we passed the Patriot Act, but then you look what the government did with it to basically undermine all of our
Mm-hmm.
rights with that, with the Patriot
Yep.
Act, and then you look at the people that were there, right? Harris and Adams and Hochul and all of these people from New York who are absolute disgrace. But when you look at the big picture and you realize that I'm traveling, through an airport and I have, somebody from Homeland Security patting me down and touching my privates, yet the
Mm-hmm.
border's open. And you
Right.
have in New York, they have 110,000 illegals, none of whom have been vetted, but you're going to search me, get on a plane.
Yeah.
All right. Could we be more off the beam here? I mean,
Yeah.
you can't be. We gave up our rights, and then they took big advantage of us with the Patriot Act. They took big advantage of the
Yes, they
surveillance
did.
limitations are just, they're gone. And we gave up all of these things because we just thought it was a good idea and it was the right thing to do and everything. Yet they use it to undermine all of our freedoms. And like I said, I get patted down and searched and frisked because I'm getting on a plane.
Or
Yet,
grandma gets
yeah,
patted and
right.
searched and frisked. Yeah.
And the border is wide
Yeah.
open for terrorists
Yeah.
coming in from all over the country. And I'll say this for the thousandth time: these are not people who are from Latin America and Central America anymore. Just ask anybody that's on the border. They're coming from every country in Africa and the Middle East, and all the people that hate us, they're coming in droves. And
Yes.
China
I'm
too.
I'm glad you said that because the current mayor of New York City made
Adams.
a statement. Yeah, Adams. Last night they shared this too, folks. He had said, what was it, a year ago, 2 years ago, something like that. That the we should let them in.
Yeah,
We're a
sanctuary
sanctuary city.
city.
We're proud of being a sanctuary city. I mean, these people, they want to come here. They want to have the American dream. It's fantastic. The people in Texas, they're a bunch of racists, so they don't want them in. And now because he's being sent these folks. Now he's like, oh, this is a danger to our city. They were coming from now, but now they're coming from all these other countries, and they're coming from West Africa and all these other places, and this is a huge problem. And it's gonna, And I'm
Right.
like, oh wow, consequences.
Right. And they want $12 billion.
Who would have guessed that was a thing?
Yeah, they want to. He wants a bailout. You have to cut services to pay for
No,
illegals.
no,
And
you get nothing.
there's so much more going on up there. I mean, people don't even talk about this. A lot of the sports programs that, of course, were suspended for COVID-19.
Sure.
Now they're back on beam. But guess what? So many of the fields, in particular on Randall's Island, which is like the hub of public school education athletics, they have camps there, so they can't use the fields anymore. So the kids aren't playing.
Yep.
And that's just it's mind-boggling that we've gotten to this point. And look, you reap what you sow. And he's blaming the governor of Texas. And we could stop all this tomorrow. And if Speaker McCarthy had any chops, they would stop the money to everybody but the Border Patrol and ICE. Stop everything else. Stop all the money going to the NGOs, because the NGOs are making billions. And a lot of these are Christian organizations and Catholic organizations. They're making a fortune moving these people. They're involved in human trafficking. It's the government, the government of the United States, the Mexican cartels, and all of these church groups. A lot of these church groups are trafficking these people all over the country. If they stop the money to the NGOs, if they stop the money to the UN, if they stop the money to the World Health Organization, a lot of our problems would go away. A lot of them would go away because these people.
John, that makes too much sense.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of one of the reasons I ran for office, but people don't vote for common sense. They just don't.
Right. Yeah.
Gotta be flashy. I guess I wasn't flashy.
They vote for whoever has the biggest fear story. And I just want to say there's a great song out there. Fear, he is a liar. Okay. Don't let fear bring you down, folks. Don't let fear force you into submitting to things that are wholly unconstitutional and unhealthy, not even good for you. Not only the illegal, they're just plain out not good for you. So please don't do it. Was it the former president of Czech Republic that they had on there last night? And he made the point that, the whole goal of communism was to separate people so that they couldn't get together in groups to overthrow communism. So look, if they say, you have to believe what they say, folks. Sometimes when they say the number one threat to them is domestic terrorism, what they're talking about is we the people are their threat, because we can say enough of this. We're not going to tolerate it another day. And they recognize that is the biggest threat. And so they're trying to figure out ways to mitigate that. And one of those ways is to keep us from being able to get together. Where's that thing at?
That's why they close bars and churches during the pandemic.
These things right here, they're very handy. The problem is they're also a tool for the government to track everything you say and do, every place you go. They can track you with these devices. So, and don't think for a second that they aren't using that information. That's how they got all the folks they did at the Capitol. And that's, of course, how they could get the folks that, the bomber, the guy who put the pipe bomb down and everything else. They could have gotten him too. But anyway.
Right. But, the cell phone pings, they're not reliable.
Right.
They're not reliable, because that's why 2000 Mules was a fraud, because the cell phones, they're not reliable, but they traced everybody who got locked up on January 6th by their phone.
And that's how they got Obama.
Arbitrary enforcement of the law.
What's his name? Oh my gosh, the terrorist we killed. What is his name? The one we killed that was hiding in the caves. They got him that way too.
Bin Laden.
Bin Laden, thank you, Bin Laden. Yeah, that's how they got Bin Laden.
That's a whole other story, because they knew where he was for a very long time.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they had him under surveillance, and he was running the show. And then when they realized that, he was being surveilled,
Yeah.
even his own people said, "Well, look, this guy's no longer running the show." So they kind of eased him out, and then he was disposable to everybody, so they killed him.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
easy. But they were actually getting a lot of information from him because he didn't realize that they had zeroed in on him. So they thwarted everything that he was trying to put together. And then
Yeah.
they kind of realized, his side realized that our side, and they said, "You know what? Okay, he's disposable. Let's get rid of him." And
Yep.
that's what happens always.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, folks, that's going to do it for our show today. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed it and took away a little bit of information. Again, can't say this enough. Please vote. There are local elections coming up this November for things like city council, some of the mayoral races, and everything else across the state are coming up. So please make yourself available. In fact, let me see if I can't pull that up real quick
Yeah.
and read out some of those dates to you because I think it's that important
And
that you know.
the fact that
Um,
they don't want you involved, to be
right.
honest. And the
So
way you can tell that is that they always call it an off year.
right, right.
So you're off. You don't
So
have to
the
vote.
first election coming up is Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. That's in 56 days. And then Saturday, February 24th, that's on 2024. That's in 165 days. That's the presidential one. Tuesday, June 11th, 273 days away. And then Tuesday, November 5th, that's 420 days away. So those are the four important dates that you need to know coming up. November 7th, 56 days away. That is going to determine who some of the mayors that we have and city council. Those are the folks that really can make an impact on you. So please, if you're not registered to vote, you need to do that quickly. I think you have to be registered within 30 days of an election to be able to vote in that election. So get out here. It's very easy to do. If you don't have the time to go by the DMV and get registered, you can go to southcarolinavotes.gov and sign up to vote from there. But that's all I've got. So, John, anything else from you?
No, that we covered a lot. We could probably go for another hour, but things to do,
Absolutely.
place to go, people to see, and money to make.
Absolutely. So, anyway, folks, thanks again. God bless, Godspeed, and we will see you next time.